The rain was hitting my windshield pretty hard when I sat in that parking garage, staring at my phone screen, showing 23 missed calls. Just 2 days earlier, Oliver Stanton had looked me straight in the eye and told me I wasn't ready for a promotion. Now, everyone at Zenith Solutions was calling me like the building was on fire. My name is Charles Henderson. I am 49 years old, and until that conversation with my boss, I thought I knew exactly where my career was heading. Turns out I was wrong about a lot of things. I have been at Zenith Solutions for 8 years now. Before that, I spent 12 years in the Navy handling logistics operations. When you are responsible for getting supplies to ships halfway around the world, you learn pretty quick that details matter. Every system, every process, every backup plan, they all have to work perfectly or people get hurt. That mindset served me well in corporate America, maybe too well. When I started at Zenith, the operations department was a complete disaster. My predecessor had left without any documentation, no handover notes, nothing. It was like walking into a house where someone had cut all the electrical wires and removed all the labels. I spent the first 6 months rebuilding everything from scratch, working until midnight most nights, coming in on weekends, mapping out every process, and creating detailed guides for everything. My son Henry was only 7 then. This was about 5 years after my wife passed away. And I remember him asking why Daddy was always at work, but I thought it would pay off eventually. That is what they tell you, right? Work hard, keep your head down, and you will get recognized. For 8 years, I was the guy who made sure everything ran smoothly. When our biggest client, Summit Industries, had urgent requests, I was the one who stayed late to handle them. When systems crashed, I fixed them. When processes broke down, I rebuilt them. I created training materials, documented every workflow, and basically became the institutional memory of the entire operations department. Oliver Stanton became my boss about 3 years ago. Nice enough guy, about 4 to 5, very focused on the big picture stuff. The problem was he never bothered to learn any of the actual systems. Why would he? I had everything running so smoothly that he could focus on strategic planning and executive meetings. What I did not know was that Oliver had other plans for the department. His son Bradley had just graduated with a master's degree. 26 years old, smart kid. But he had never worked a day in operations. Never handled a crisis at 2 in the morning. Never had to explain to an angry client why their shipment was delayed. Never had to rebuild a system from nothing. The promotion meeting happened on a Tuesday. I had prepared a comprehensive presentation showing how I had improved efficiency by 35% over the past 2 years, reduced errors by 60%, and personally managed the Summit Industries relationship that brought in $8 million annually. Oliver flipped through my portfolio for maybe 5 minutes before setting it aside. "I appreciate everything you have done, Charles," he said, not really looking at me. "But I have been thinking about the direction of this department. We need fresh perspectives, new energy. Bradley will be joining us next month as Senior Operations Manager." Senior Operations Manager. That was the position I had been working toward for 8 years. "I see," I said. "And where does that leave me?" "You will continue in your current role. Bradley will need someone experienced to help him get up to speed." Translation: I do all the work while his son got the title and the salary bump. I kept my expression neutral the way they taught us in the Navy. "I understand. Thank you for the feedback." "Great. I am glad we are on the same page. Bradley starts Monday, so maybe you can prepare some orientation materials over the weekend." That is when something clicked for me. I had been working weekends for 8 years. I had missed Henry's baseball games, school plays, parent-teacher conferences. I had given this company everything, and they wanted me to spend my weekend preparing to train my replacement. I stood up, shook Oliver's hand, and walked out of his office. But instead of going back to my desk, I walked straight to the parking garage. That is where I made the decision that changed everything. I was not going to quit in anger. I was not going to storm out or make a scene. I was going to do something much more effective. I was going to follow my job description exactly as written. See, here is what Oliver and the executives did not understand. My official job description was pretty basic. Manage daily operations within assigned scope. Coordinate with other departments as needed. Maintain client relationships within operational parameters. standard corporate language that did not come close to describing what I actually did every day. What I actually did was arrive at 7 in the morning to prep briefing notes for Oliver's 9 o'clock meetings. I answered emails for 3 different departments because somehow I had become the person for any operational question. I solved problems before they became crises, staying late to make sure nothing exploded overnight. But my job description said 9 to 5, so that is what I was going to do. I drove home that Tuesday evening and did something I had not done in years. I turned off my work phone at 5:30. Henry was shocked when I walked in the door at 6 instead of 8 or 9. "Dad, why are you home so early?" I decided my time was more valuable than I thought. I told him. "Want to throw a baseball around before dinner?" His face lit up. Wednesday morning, I arrived at exactly 9. No briefing notes for Oliver, no getting ahead of the day's crisis. I answered emails addressed directly to me and forwarded everything else to the appropriate departments. When my phone rang with questions about processes that were not technically my responsibility, I politely directed callers to the relevant department heads. By lunch, people were starting to notice. Susan from accounting stopped by my desk with a confused expression. "Charles, did you see the email about the Summit Industries shipping schedule conflict?" "I did," I replied, continuing to work on my assigned quarterly report. "So, can you fix it like you usually do?" "That is actually a logistics coordination issue. I forwarded it to shipping and procurement. They will need to work it out together." Her eyebrows went up. "But you always handle these cross-department things." "I have been advised to focus more on my core responsibilities," I said with a smile. "I am just trying to be more efficient with my time." The look of confusion on Susan's face told me everything I needed to know. Nobody had ever bothered to understand what my actual job was supposed to be versus what I had been doing all these years. By Thursday, the cracks were really starting to show. The Summit Industries issue had escalated because shipping and procurement could not figure out the workaround I would normally handle in 10 minutes. 3 other clients had routine requests that were sitting in various departments because nobody knew the proper escalation procedures. I watched it all unfold with the detached interest of someone observing a science experiment. Every email that sat unanswered, every phone call that got transferred 3 times, every urgent request that nobody could handle, it was all documented in my comprehensive operations manual that apparently nobody had ever bothered to read. Paul from procurement wandered by my desk around 2 in the afternoon looking frazzled. "Charles, the purchase order is stuck in approval hell. Can you work your magic? What seems to be the issue?" I asked, genuinely curious. "The system will not accept their new billing address, and nobody knows how to override it." I nodded thoughtfully. "That process is covered in Section 7 of the Operations Manual. The override requires supervisor approval from both procurement and accounting. But that will take hours of phone calls and emails back and forth. It is a security feature to prevent billing fraud. Pretty important protection for the company." Paul stared at me. "You have always just handled these things in 5 minutes." I had special authorization from previous management to expedite certain processes, but with the department restructuring coming up, I thought it best to follow standard protocols. He walked away shaking his head, probably wondering when I had become such a stickler for rules. Thursday evening, I was home by 5:15. Henry was working on homework at the kitchen table when I walked in. "Dad, can you help me with this math problem?" For the first time in months, I actually had the mental energy to sit down and focus on his algebra instead of thinking about work emergencies. We spent an hour working through problems together, and I realized how much I had missed these simple moments. "You know, Dad," Henry said as we finished up, "you seem different this week." "Different how?" "Less stressed, I guess, like you were actually here when you were here." Smart kid. He had noticed something. I was just starting to understand myself. Friday morning brought the real crisis. I arrived at 9 to find chaos in full swing. Oliver was pacing outside the conference room, Bradley was already there looking overwhelmed, and Edward Foster, our regional director, had apparently been called in for an emergency meeting. The receptionist flagged me down before I could reach my desk. "Charles, they need you in the conference room immediately." I gathered my notebook and walked into what was clearly a full-scale crisis situation. Besides Oliver, Bradley, and Edward, there were two people I did not recognize, probably executives from corporate headquarters. Charles, Edward said with obvious relief. Thank God you are here. We have a serious situation with Summit Industries. What is the specific issue? Oliver launched into an explanation, but it was clear he only understood half the problem. Summit had called an emergency meeting because their implementation was failing. Bradley took notes frantically, but kept asking basic questions that showed he had no understanding of our systems. Their entire fourth quarter rollout is at risk. One of the corporate executives said they are threatening to pull the contract if we cannot resolve this today. I reviewed the issue details they had gathered. It was actually a fairly straightforward problem if you understood the system dependencies and had access to the right documentation. This is a known issue with their custom configuration. I said the resolution is documented in the Implementation Guide, Section 12. It requires coordinating changes across 3 different systems in a specific sequence. Bradley was frantically flipping through his copy of the manual. Which section exactly? Section 12, subsection 4.7 through 4.2.12. The process takes about 3 hours if you follow the step-by-step procedures. Edward leaned forward. Can you handle this immediately? I checked my watch. I have the quarterly compliance review scheduled at 11. That is due to federal regulators by end of day, so it cannot be rescheduled. The compliance review can wait, Oliver said quickly. Summit is more critical. I understand Summit is important, I replied. However, missing the regulatory deadline results in automatic penalties and potential license suspension. That would affect all our clients, not just Summit. The room went silent. You could practically hear everyone calculating the implications. What are our options? Edward asked carefully. Well, Bradley could handle the Summit issue using the documented procedures. It would be excellent training for him, and I would be available for questions between compliance review sessions. Bradley looked like a deer in headlights. I do not think I am ready for something this critical. The documentation is very detailed, I said encouragingly. Everything is laid out step by step. This is exactly the kind of hands-on experience you will need in your new role. Oliver's face was getting red. Charles, we need you to fix this personally. I am happy to take point on Summit, I said, if you would like me to reschedule the compliance review, but I want to be clear about the regulatory implications. Edward held up a hand. Let us think this through. What would it take to handle both? I considered the timeline. The compliance review is scheduled in 2-hour blocks. I could handle the most critical Summit fixes between sessions, but the full resolution would not be complete until after 5. That is cutting it very close with Summit's deadline. The corporate executive noted it is. I agreed. In the past, I would have stayed until midnight to handle both. But I have been reflecting on work-life balance lately. My son has a baseball game tonight that I have already missed twice this month. The silence was deafening. Edward finally broke the silence. Charles, let me be direct. What would it take for you to handle this crisis the way you always have? I looked around the room at the faces staring at me. These people had relied on my expertise for 8 years without ever acknowledging what I actually contributed. Now suddenly my work-life balance was their emergency. Well, I said slowly, I suppose we should discuss what my role actually is here. Your role is to solve operational problems, Oliver said. According to my job description, my role is to manage daily operations within assigned scope. The Summit implementation falls under project management, which reports to a different department. The corporate executive leaned forward. Are you saying you will not help? Not at all. I am saying that if we want to resolve this properly, we need to clarify responsibilities and authorities. Bradley is starting as Senior Operations Manager on Monday. This seems like an excellent opportunity for him to learn the systems. Bradley spoke up, his voice shaky. Charles, I appreciate your confidence, but I am not ready for something this high stakes. I turned to him with genuine kindness. Bradley, you have a master's degree. You are smart and capable. The only difference between you and me is that I have seen these problems before, but every expert was once a beginner. But what if I mess it up? Then we will fix it. That is how you learn. The documentation is comprehensive and I will be available for guidance. Oliver was getting impatient. We do not have time for training exercises. Actually, we do. I said the summit issue is not going anywhere in the next few hours. It has been building for weeks because nobody wanted to follow the proper implementation procedures. A few more hours will not change anything. Edward studied me carefully. Charles, it seems like something has changed in your approach this week. You are right. I have been doing some thinking about my career trajectory and what I want my legacy to be. And what conclusion did you reach? That I have been enabling a system that does not work. By constantly stepping in to solve problems outside my official role, I have prevented the company from building proper processes and developing other people's capabilities. The room was quiet except for the hum of the air conditioning. Let me ask you something, I continued. What happens when I retire or get hit by a bus or decide to take that job offer from Vanguard Industries? The corporate executive's eyes sharpened. What job offer? A competitor reached out last month. Director of Operations, 35% salary increase, full remote flexibility. I have not responded yet because I have been loyal to Zenith. I was not lying. Vanguard had reached out, though I had not seriously considered their offer until this week. Edward and the corporate executive exchanged glances. Oliver looked like he was going to be sick. Perhaps we should discuss this privately, Edward said. Bradley, why do you not start reviewing the summit documentation with Charles's guidance? Everyone else, let us step into my office. As Bradley and I walked to my desk, he seemed overwhelmed. Charles, I want you to know I never asked my dad to give me this promotion. I know you deserved it. I stopped walking and looked at him. Bradley, you seem like a good kid, but here is the thing. This is not about what you asked for or what you deserve. It is about what is best for the company and what is best for you. What do you mean? If your father had promoted you over me without proper preparation, you would have failed. Not because you are incompetent, but because you are not ready. That failure would have damaged your confidence and your reputation for years, Bradley nodded, slowly. I had not thought about it that way. Leadership is not about getting the title first and figuring it out later. It is about developing the competence to handle the responsibility. If you are serious about operations management, you need to learn these systems inside and out. We spent the next hour going through the summit documentation. Bradley was actually quite sharp. He asked good questions and grasped concepts quickly. With proper mentoring, he could become a solid operations manager in a couple of years. Around noon, Edward returned to my desk. Charles, could I speak with you privately? We walked to his office where the corporate executive was waiting. I noticed Oliver was not there. Please sit down, Edward said. I want to be completely transparent with you. We have made some serious mistakes in how we have managed this department. What mistakes specifically? The corporate executive spoke up. We have created an unsustainable dependency on your expertise without appropriate recognition or compensation, and we have allowed personal relationships to influence professional decisions. I waited for them to continue. We would like to offer you the position of Director of Operations, reporting directly to me, Edwards said. 35% salary increase, authority to restructure the department as you see fit, and full hiring authority for 2 additional senior positions. It was a good offer, not as dramatic as the 75% increase I had fantasized about, but realistic and fair. What about Bradley? I asked. Bradley will start as an operations associate and work his way up under your guidance. If he demonstrates competence, he can advance based on merit. And Oliver Edwards shifted uncomfortably. Oliver will be transitioning to a strategic planning role. The operational departments will report through your office. So Oliver was being moved sideways. It was not revenge exactly, but it was accountability. I need to consider this, I said. Of course. But Charles, I need an answer by Monday morning, and I would appreciate if you could help stabilize the summit situation today, regardless of your decision. I nodded. I will handle summit this afternoon. Bradley can assist and take detailed notes. As I walked back to my desk, I thought about what had just happened. They were offering me everything I had wanted. Recognition, authority, appropriate compensation, but more importantly, they were finally acknowledging the value I had been providing all along. The question was, did I want to stay and fix this system or start fresh somewhere else? That afternoon, Bradley and I worked together on the Summit Industries crisis. I walked him through each step of the resolution process, explaining not just what to do, but why each step mattered. He took detailed notes and asked smart questions that showed he was really trying to understand the underlying systems. "This is incredibly complex," Bradley said as we finished the technical fixes. "How did you learn all this?" "8 years of trial and error," I told him, plus a lot of late nights reading system manuals that nobody else wanted to touch. I had no idea how much went into this job. My dad made it sound like basic project coordination. I looked at him carefully. Bradley seemed genuinely humbled by the experience. "Your dad is not wrong that it involves coordination, but operations is about understanding how all the pieces fit together and what happens when they do not." We wrapped up the summit fixes by 4:30. Their system was running smoothly again, and Bradley had a comprehensive set of notes for handling similar issues in the future. As I was packing up to leave at 5, my phone buzzed with a text from Henry. "Dad, game starts at 6:30. Will you really be there?" I looked at that text for a long moment. For 8 years, the honest answer would have been probably not. Tonight, the answer was different. "Would not miss it," I texted back. Henry's baseball game was everything I had been missing. He pitched 4 strong innings, and I got to see him strike out the cleanup hitter with a curveball I had taught him last weekend. After the game, we went for ice cream and talked about school, his friends, and his plans for summer. "Dad," he said as we sat outside the ice cream shop, "are you going to keep coming to my games?" "That is the plan, buddy. I have been working too much, and I do not want to miss any more of your seasons." "Good," he said, grinning, because Tommy's dad never misses his games, and I was getting jealous. That hit me harder than I expected. My 12-year-old son had been watching other fathers show up while his dad was stuck in meetings about quarterly reports. Over the weekend, I thought long and hard about Edward's offer. The director position was everything I had worked toward: recognition, authority, and the ability to build systems that would help other people advance instead of getting stuck like I had. But there was also something appealing about the fresh start that Vanguard Industries represented. No history of being overlooked. No colleagues who still saw me as the behind-the-scenes problem solver rather than leadership material. On Sunday evening, I made my decision. Monday morning, I arrived at 8:30, a compromise between my old 7 routine and the strict 9 I had been maintaining. I went straight to Edward's office. "I am accepting your offer," I told him, "but with 2 conditions." Edward nodded. "Go ahead. First, I want full authority to hire and develop talent from within the company. Too many good people get overlooked because they are not in the right positions to showcase their abilities." Agreed. Second, I want to implement a comprehensive cross-training program. What happened this week should never happen again. No critical knowledge should exist in only one person's head. Also agreed. Anything else? Just one thing. I want Bradley to succeed in this field if it is what he really wants, but he needs to earn it through competence, not connections. Edward smiled. "I think you will find Bradley is more committed to learning than any of us expected." The transition took about 6 weeks. I restructured the department around clear roles and responsibilities instead of the informal system of whoever handles it best. I hired 2 excellent senior staff members who brought fresh perspectives while I provided the institutional knowledge they needed to be effective. Bradley turned out to be a dedicated learner. He worked harder than anyone expected, staying late not because he had to, but because he wanted to master the systems. Within 3 months, he was handling routine client issues independently and showing real potential for leadership. The most surprising development was with Oliver. Once he was not trying to manage operations he did not understand. He actually excelled at strategic planning. His big-picture thinking, combined with the solid operational foundation we were building, helped the company land 2 major new contracts. 6 months later, I was working at a sustainable pace. Home for dinner by 6:30 most nights, and present for every one of Henry's remaining games that season. My team was functioning independently, clients were happy, and I felt like I was finally doing the job I had always been capable of. One evening, as Henry and I worked on homework together, he asked me about work. "So, you are like really important now?" he said, looking up from his algebra. "I was always important, Henry. It just took them a while to figure it out." "Is that why you were working so much before?" To prove you were important. Smart kid. Yeah, I think so. But I learned something. The people who matter will see your value without you having to work yourself to death proving it. And the people who do not see it, well, sometimes you have to step back and let them figure out what they are missing. As I watched my son work through his math problems with the same methodical approach I tried to teach him, I realized that the best response to being undervalued is not anger or revenge. It is demonstrating your worth so clearly that it becomes impossible to ignore. The promotion to director came with respect, authority, and the ability to build something better. But the real victory was simpler than that. I was finally being seen for what I had always been capable of doing, and I was home for dinner every night to help my son with his homework. If you have ever felt invisible at work despite doing excellent work, remember this. Your value does not disappear just because others cannot see it. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stop making their blindness your problem and start making your worth impossible to ignore. During this entire ordeal, I uncovered some deeply troubling issues that Oliver had been hiding. While cleaning up the old server files, I stumbled upon unauthorized vendor agreements. Upon closer inspection, it was clear that Oliver had committed California Penal Code Section 470 forgery by signing my name on documents I never approved. Furthermore, his handling of the company's financial assets constituted a clear breach of fiduciary duty. The contracts he had signed with these shady vendors were completely void ab initio because they lacked proper authorization and legal standing. It did not stop there. I discovered that a new product design he was pushing through was actually a blatant 17 USC, 106 and 35 USC. The paragraph 271 patent infringement on a competitor's intellectual property. I also found out that he was involved in a messy divorce, where his wife had invoked their prenuptial agreement infidelity clause after catching him in a lie. To make matters even worse, I learned through the grapevine that his own father was suing him for California Welfare and Institutions Code 15.6.10.2030, elder financial abuse, after Oliver had drained his retirement accounts to cover his tracks. As if that was not enough, Zenith Solutions had recently closed a small satellite office without giving the employees the required 60 days notice, directly violating the Warren Act, all under Oliver's directive.